Please let's welcome Tom Burckhardt and Kathy Butterly.
Hi.
Hey. We just saw each other, like, home. Anyway, I thought it was weird that you wanted me to interview you or be your person other than your wife. But then it does kind of make sense, because I do know you the best out of anybody in the whole world, other than yourself. Though maybe sometimes no, I'm kidding. So anyway, I just want to say that to start off, just before we get into a little bit more depth, I watched Tom make these paintings. These were all made up in Ceresmont, Maine last summer, after his mom had passed away suddenly. And we decided we needed to get up to Maine right away. And we shared a studio, like just with a little partition wall between us. And so I got to watch Tom make these paintings. I mean, I watched him make his paintings in New York too, but it was different. There was a different flow and a different cycle that we had in Maine because our situation was different. And watching these paintings develop, I tried not to talk to you about them, because I always find if I say anything, you negate it and you cross it out later. So I was very quiet, but I kind of knew while I was watching you make these that it's like a leap. There's been a big shift in the work, and I think from my perspective, these are your best works to date. And I'm just really proud of you. The work ethic also is just our style. Like, we both work incredibly long hours. But Tom would wake up pretty much at 5 in the morning up in Maine and just have his coffee and then go to the studio and work until around noon. And then that was the whole summer building these paintings? So anyway, I wrote down some questions. I figured it was going to suit me better. And I thought, all right, I have 5 questions that I wrote down, and then anybody who knows me and Tom knows that we have the gift of gab, so I think that will take up the whole 45 minutes. But I think that just a little bit of introduction to Maine and why it's so important to both of us. I mean, New York is too, of course. But we started going up to Maine when we were dating, and we just go up and use it as kind of like a little vacation, 2 weeks away. And then we had Kino, our first child, and we decided to spend the whole summer up there. And then we started to start working up there. And we were in the kids' school schedule, so that was 1.5 to 2 months every summer, little taste of Maine and go back. Now we're trying to spend as much time up there as the good months, sorry people who live in Maine, we're taking the really good months up there. But we're there now, we'll go up there May 14th, and we'll be there. You'll be there for 3 months, and I'll be there a little longer. So it's really a big part of our life. And so a lot of the questions that I have are sort of Maine-centric. So my first question. I'm going to just read them. My first observation, all the years that I've known you, you've done everything possible not to be a conventional painter. These are oil paintings on stretched linen and are hard-edged and rectangular shapes. I think this is a first for you. How do you feel about this? And, I didn't write on the other side. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, I would say that these are probably in some ways my most regular paintings in a long time. And what Kathy was referring to was that for the last maybe, 8 years or 7 years, I've been taking nice stretcher bars and cutting them with a jigsaw to kind of mess up the edges and get them kind of wobbly. And the reason I was doing that was before that I was working on kind of cast plastic that looked like canvases. And I think that those things were always about getting something that was kind of weird and that no one else would think was a good idea. Like taking a nice, machine edge stretcher bar and cutting it with a jigsaw is such a stupid idea that no one would think about it. And I like the sense that that would be some sort of a peculiarity that only I would likely do. And that it kind of felt like a part of a signature to the work for me. So I've always had, and before that I was working with enamel paint for many years, so not quite the typical materials or typical supports. And I've always had my supports be very important about how physical they are. So even cutting that edge or having them be on plastic was always about having this very sculptural physical quality, which I will assign at least in part to being married to Kathy, for sure. And so this summer I just stretched the canvas loose on a wall. I didn't have stretcher bars, and I kind of intended to stretch them on the kind of wobbly edge. And Michael Berryhill, who's here, said, "You don't have to do that." And I'm like, "You're absolutely right. I don't have to do that." So they ended up being, I didn't have to make a decision for them to be so much more regular. It kind of was like that easy in a way, which is like the way I like to have things happen, is not fret about them too much, but just kind of have them occur like that in a lot of ways. And I don't think I miss anything about that in these. I don't think that, I feel like they're still peculiar in many, many ways. That is still important. How do I feel about that? Well, this summer was about setting myself up to kind of have a methodology and an approach that would let me not get in my own way in a certain sense. So the things such as just stretching the canvas on the wall and working directly, not having to kind of invest in the stretcher bars yet. And then some other key things were that, as mentioned, my mom had passed away, and she was an artist, Yvonne Jaquette, who many of you know of. And she had mixed all of her colors often and put them into little tubes that she would then squeeze out. So you had kind of have a custom mix of colors for a given painting. So I just used all those tubes full of paint of hers, mostly to kind of, there was a lot of things this summer to kind of lower the stakes to be able to make big paintings. And so one of the things was like free paint, like that I had there, a bunch of free linen that she had left over. Don't stretch them up and have them be that kind of, initial pressure of working on a large stretched canvas, which can kind of have implications in terms of how you bring your courage to it or something like that. It was meant to be that, like, I'm just going to work on these things unstretched and just plow through and not curate what's happening quite so much, and then decide at some later date, such as when we're going to have a show of them, which ones we will actually make stretchers for. So that was a really good approach for me, and it allowed me to kind of move with a lot of momentum and a lot of commitment through the paintings, but without the kind of quite the pressure that can happen of feeling like, I'm investing a lot of money or importance or things like that into the canvas initially. So I felt that it let me do some things such as just keep going and not really stop and think too much. I didn't have to like spend that day stretching up the next canvas, which is a kind of a demarcation point somehow as you're moving forward. I just throw up another piece of canvas. And I also tried to kind of have moments where, and I think this painting here is a really good example of that, where I would just let it be at earlier stages than I was used to. And that meant kind of leaving it more open, and pretty much everything you see on that painting is what was done to it, not much more. Whereas some of the others, like the one facing it there, had a lot of stages worked through and a lot of process and overlays come into it. So when that has to happen, it should happen, and when this can happen, let me do that. And that's a little bit new for me. So that's how I felt about it. And I felt excited kind of right away that I didn't feel that all those things that I was doing, like I said, as a methodology, were ways to kind of just be able to make big paintings, and I felt kind of comfortable right away, which I wasn't sure that I would. I thought there would be some kind of, I've done large paintings before, but not in a little while, so I felt kind of at ease quite quickly right away to be able to do that. I just kind of plowed through and, would pick up the pieces later kind of approach. So that was the feeling for me. And the other thing is that it was also bracketed by being in Maine, and also bracketed by the fact that because my mom had passed away in April, there was going to be a lot of work to be done on her estate. And I was like, I can't really do it while I'm up in Maine. I need to be physically with her works, with her artworks, to kind of go through all this stuff, to go through her papers and stuff like that. And so I was like, I'm deferring all that till the fall when I come back. And so it was like a painting vacation from those other tasks, which I knew and was the case that I wouldn't be able to work for the whole fall because I was just going to be doing that plus teaching or jobs or whatever. So that's kind of the environment that these paintings happened in. Next question.
So, like, to sum it up, you gave yourself permission to paint. I'm not going off script here a little bit, so I might throw myself off. But you talked about the formal aspects of building a painting and using materials that were available and free, but you didn't. And do you want to touch upon, like, emotionally what it meant to use your mom's materials?
Sure. I've been kind of saying this since then, is that I'm a little bit pretending that, yes, it was just a practical approach to using these free materials, and that it wasn't particularly sentimental. It was my dad's Swiss side of me, like, well, there's free paint. You should use it. You shouldn't waste anything, And we all know doesn't stop there, that there is a sentimental thing to it. And I don't really know what it is exactly. I think the thing is that, when my mom died, I was working on a show of her early work right when she died that I'd been working on for like 4 years before. And it was a terrific thing to have happen right then at this difficult moment of losing your mom, because it was a project that was all about her. It wasn't like a project that was a distraction. It wasn't like, oh, I've got to go do my office job and pretend I'm not thinking about this. It was very much focused on her, and very much focused on her life and not her passing. So it was a very valuable way to kind of go through that process of losing her and mourning in a way. So these maybe are a little bit like that, in that I'm taking on some sort of spirit of thinking about her. She's kind of present. I've been asked, are these collaborations with her? No, that's not the right word at all. So they don't look anything like her or like her work. That's one thing that is even though I'm using the same paint as her, the way I'm using it is completely different, because she was using colors in a depictive way to kind of, paint an image that's, representational. And mine are really not that. The one thing that we did kind of, in a sense, bridge together and come together was that the reason she was making these paints and putting them in these tubes is because she would always mix them a little bit off of the kind of the basic, fully saturated store brands or whatever. She'd mix a little bit of white into it. Like that blue that's in the background is pretty much straight out of one of her tubes, let's say. So it's a kind of a peculiar color. I don't think you can quite buy that color, right? So she would mix it a little bit tuned off of, a little bit muted or a little bit, some sort of other bridge tone quality to it. And that's the way I've always made my paintings anyway. I've always mixed the paint with something to kind of make it a little less pure in a way. So I already kind of had a found color library in a way, and I was remixing those things again often, But so there's a presence there. There's a continuity, and I don't know what to say much more about it, like whether I was even consciously thinking of it very strongly. It wasn't like I was, feeling her in the paintings in a very conscious way necessarily, even with this material. I don't know. I feel like this is for someone else to figure out.
Okay, so question number 2. The paintings in your last show at George Adams were smaller, more dense, and referential to heads. They were more object-y in how I look at things. And I still see references to figuration in these, but I also feel that they're talking about spaces, about places. And they've opened up a lot for me. Here's our Maine story. We sit on our back porch in Maine like all the time. And we sit there, have our coffee, and I stare off into the forest a lot. And I'm pretty aware of these portals that the pine trees make in space. They come together and they create these circles that bring my imagination further into the forest. And I was wondering, do you see that? and like for me, it's a place where my imagination takes off and like enters my thinking and my world. And I'm wondering, like, questions. Do you think about this stuff, and like, how does Maine enter your work, and how did these paintings open up so much? And also, sorry, the obvious part of that question too could be like, do you think there's the space opened up simply because they're larger, and like you just had more space to have things breathe, or was it that you're changing and you're talking about place more than COVID heads? Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I think this painting over there is an example of kind of a little bit more what she was describing of the last show. That's a recent painting, but it is a little more like, has this singularity of kind of a head-like form, and there's often in those maybe more of a difference between figure and ground. And I think these are more scrambled. These larger ones are a little more scrambled in that way. The space, I don't really, I remember as a younger artist realizing that I never thought about space. I thought about like color and form, but space, which is I suppose the third big part of that tripod, I never even think about that. And I think my space in paintings has almost from the beginning been kind of proscenium-like or theatrical or something like that. Not really ever having an evocation of real deep, space that we live in and navigate with our bodies and, see things off in the distance. I never really quite felt it was like that. It always felt like that they were, the flatness of the canvas was always like, that's the space, right? So that was very clearly, for me, always the place that these things happen on. In terms of your question about, like, Maine and in these paintings, or seeing things in Maine that maybe might get into the paintings, I almost would say no, actually. I think that, or I don't know where it is exactly. These to me don't, if I were to walk in here, I would say these paintings do not look like they were made in the particular environment of Maine, the way that affects many artists, the kind of the sense of, some of them are green a little bit, but other than that, I don't really, they just physically were made in Maine. That's how much Maine they are in a way. I think that what has happened with them, if something has happened to them spatially, what it is that's different from the earlier ones, which were maybe more singular, is that they're continuing an interest in the way we kind of push in and recognize figuration in abstract situations, right? Which is called pareidolia. That's like when you see the bunny rabbit in the trees, or Jesus is in the burnt tortilla, or things like that. That I don't think many Catholics see the Jesus in the burnt tortilla, right? I mean, non-Catholics. You have to kind of have this kind of, it's the way vision and perception is so built out of our expectations, which is kind of often discounted. We think that perception is I'm just going to sit here and suck it in with my eyes. It's so much this loop of perception is us pushing our expectations onto things, and then we see them in a way. And so I'm really interested in exploiting that way that something can suddenly turn into something, and because I'm kind of feel that if I have a trajectory in these paintings, it's that I move from an abstract, formal idea place into things that start to appear. They come up almost like phantoms, but not in any kind of really supernatural way. They kind of bubble up in a way, and I let myself encourage those things then, rather than be a good abstract painter and kind of try and get rid of that associative kind of viewing that we might have. So when I started these paintings, I was like, I want to make them bigger, and I'm not sure how they're going to get expanded on from what these were. And I think what I noticed that did happen, luckily without me trying to control it too consciously, was that there were often images that happened that, like this maybe especially this one over here, Future Rapture, or the one up at the front called Appointed, where there is a part of the image that we have more recognition of, that we start seeing something figurative in, something facial, something bodily, or something like that. And they're often kind of then paired up with another side or something like that, or another half, or other situations that aren't quite exactly ground, that are not just space or the things surrounding the figure. It gets more ambiguous in some of these other sides of the paintings, and often the one that we can recognize a little more is kind of often pointing at this other stuff, trying to kind of make you follow into the thing you recognize, and then go and create and construct in your mind what the other thing could be. Because once you start getting into the game of how they're building in your mind, then you kind of have to figure out how much more of this can I, do that in. And then a painting like this is ultimately I don't really see much in the same way it's figurative in this. But once you're kind of sensitized to this kind of, I guess I'm calling it a game, or participation is the better word from a viewer, then all I'm trying to do is get you to participate in the paintings and engage in the paintings, and let you maybe do more of the building. And I forgot what the question was.
All right, I have more questions. So question number 4, or 3, I don't know. So I do see like a big shift in your spatial awareness in these paintings. Like I'm sitting in this direction, so I'm going to talk about that painting. Like I do find like there's a lot of like, what's the word? Mystical depth, and then these more concrete things up front. So this brings up a question that I have is, all right, so I'm aware of that for me personally, like in New York City, I love looking at graffiti, and that influences me. And then going up to Maine, I'm very like aware of the meadow, and that influences me. And then we were just like happily we were in India for about a month, and the stained glass was, oh my God, blowing my mind. So that's influencing me. So you were kind of saying that like your environment doesn't influence your mark making or your, what the paintings are about. But is that really true? Like, because because we're avid, like we love traveling, and you have been to India 4 times and exploring the world, and it's got to influence you somehow. And also, you play gamelan music, and you're also like a master of materials. Like, you're not only an oil painter, you do cardboard installations, and you do collage on paper. And so all these different ways that you work, which are quite masterful, there's a lot of different languages going on. Like, you got to be influenced by your environment. Sorry.
See, this is why I asked you to do this, because someone else would have let me kind of slide on that last answer, and you're like, bullshit.
Because I know you.
Yeah, you know me. Well, I think that mostly these are really just in my imagination, that they're really coming out of my head. And that things that are inputs, such as being in India or all those other things, are in there, and then they scramble up in my brain, and they become weeded out from contexts that they might have if I were to present them in the painting as more contextual. So visually, things don't really look like things anymore, or something like that. So I'm not sure that there's a visuality in the paintings that I can ever point to and say, that's the part about being in India, or that's the part about looking at the meadow in Maine. That's what I think I'm trying to have my plausible deniability about, is that I don't think that that's quite there. But if our imaginations and our brains are the lint screen of our existence, then all that stuff is kind of collecting on there and kind of making a lint mat of stuff that has to kind of be, you couldn't take out those things and have it end up quite the same, for sure. But I don't know what it looks like, is what I guess what I'm kind of wondering, is that I don't know where to point to on it and say that's the thing that, maybe if I worked really hard, I could do that. But these are I'm often trying to make a painting that I don't know what's going to happen. So this one, you spoke about it being kind of having a spiritual space. Is that what the word you said? Yeah. And I agree with you on that. And that came about without any intention. I didn't say, like, I want to make a painting that has kind of a spiritual space. And so, but then because of my process of doing these paintings, of trying to get kind of lost in them, then I have to recognize when those things kind of happen and just kind of go with it. So, because then I'll make a painting that I would not have said I want to make a spiritual painting. But if I can have this process that leads me to do it and just be there with it, then great, that happens. And then these are very different. It just keeps the process open and ever changing, and kind of each painting can go to its different place, which I think that's one thing that I do think is happening in this show, is that every painting is pretty different from each other in some ways, and then very similar in other ways, like maybe it looks like mine in many ways, or something about the approach to color feels common or something like that. But the kind of images, I think they're pretty varied, I hope.
I think what I was getting at, and I think you understand this, and I think everybody else understands it, is that, like, when I say, like, what are your concrete influences? It's not like you go to India or you go up to Maine, you're just like, all of a sudden, I'm going to make green paintings because I'm in nature. It's more like, you say lint trap, I say sponge. So it's more like I'm a sponge, and then, in my work, I kind of squeeze it out. So it's really more like it's a ooze of information rather than specifics, like blender of lint.
Yeah. No. Well, this is very true. This is why we are married, is that we're, that we have this very similar approach, in that we're not trying to really name in language a lot of things in our work. We can kind of have visual pointings of things, but we're not trying to kind of have it be quite so literally named or, completely identifiable, right?
So
it's how you mix things together.
It's like we're both trying to figure things out. Like, these things are questions and puzzles that we're trying to resolve, each one for themselves. But, we're fortunate enough to be able to have these lives where we can have a lot of experiences, and I think our experiences really do come out into the work, not literally.
Yeah. You mentioned gamelan, and there was a time many, many years ago where I literally thought to myself, I can't stand, like, the way art language is and art theory, And why don't I just use gamelan theory as a way of figuring out how to stack things, a musical analogous kind of way of thinking about how to structure things. And I remember thinking that as a conscious thought back then once or twice as kind of an approach. So I think these are pretty musical in a lot of ways, in the sense that music gets to kind of escape some of those strange lines that have been drawn between, let's say, figuration and abstraction. No one ever says that's a very abstract or figurative piece of music. It all feels like it's kind of sonic material. Sometimes there's lyrics that might be explicit about a story, yes, narrative, but I know I never listen to lyrics when I listen to music. I don't even know what they're saying sometimes. It's more the kind of sonic quality of it. And so this difference between figuration and abstraction, when I was young, I remember thinking, like, what a crazy joke that is. Like, as some sort of a separation. That felt like maybe some earlier generations' beef to have. They're going to fight outside the Cedar Bar about whether they're, that kind of stuff, or they're not going to talk to that guy because he went back to figuration or something nuts like that. That seemed so ridiculous already by the time I was younger and a student, and I think it's even more so now. And, just speaking to all the artists here, we know when we're doing this stuff, I don't think we think much difference of that kind of stuff in the actual action of making a work of art. You're just so into the making of it that those kind of strange, club distinctions don't really they don't rise to such prominence most of the time, I don't think. Question number 4?
I'm not sure you answered my question before.
Okay, try again. Try again.
Or maybe I was just tuning you out. But how does working in these other materials, like when we were in India, Tom did like a very large cardboard installation, which is very different than this work, and then maybe not. Like, how does the Tom who wears many hats, how do you work? Like, how do you do it? And you're so good at everything, but like, does it get into this? Like, does your cardboard installations find their way into this work? Is it because you have to physically build, like you build a painting, like you build things up, but you're actually building and constructing, a room or forms or typewriters or whatever, like the actual physical building of something. Does that inform these these paintings? Like I'm looking at your line, your brushstroke and whatever, and you've always been a really graphic linear, you've had a graphic linear touch. There's this atmospheric stuff that's going on that I kind of feel is a little new for you, but I'm just making this reference to hard-edged cardboard and these lines and constructing, and because you are working with a real material like cardboard that's physical and takes up space, is that the portal, is that what I'm seeing here in this painting, this constructed area to this painting area? Are you thinking about 2D, 3D in these works?
Well, I think you said the right word, that the commonality is kind of a graphic sensibility. And I think I definitely like things that feel like they have kind of a sharp cut edge in the sense of a collagist kind of way of making paintings. And those cardboard things are kind of a lot like that. I think what it is if I kind of pull back for a second and see what kind of an artist I am, is that although I might range in materials and approaches, I'm a very analog person, as are many of us. The way we make artwork is, a lot of us are making very, very kind of almost ancient kind of stuff that although we're living in a very digital world, the actual making of our artwork can sometimes be incredibly old-fashioned. I mean, I sometimes feel situated between being very old-fashioned as a painter, as making paintings, and I guess less old-fashioned than some painters that work more traditionally or something like that. So I don't know where I am, but I think it's a very analog, hands-on thing, and that's where we're both very similar. It's like, and we have this making quality that is kind of a process and an intuition and a journey that the works go on, that we have a lot of trust in our, touchy-feely, analog, handmade kind of things to kind of lead somewhere, not just as stuff, but as kind of the way that our hands and our brains are making ideas happen together. That figuring it out of it, it's not just the hand and it's not just the brain, it's this kind of like dialogue between the two. So that's the commonality probably.
Do you feel like you now, using oil painting and using the hard-edged rectangle, is that a little punk rock of you? Like, is that like a little bit of like, it's not like the new hip thing, so I'm just gonna be like punk rock and go like even tighter. Like, sorry.
No,
You should see our real conversations at home.
I'm sighing as if we're in our kitchen, like, and I'm saying like the new hip thing. My brain hurts, like trying to figure out what that would be.
Are you tightening it up even? Like, I know it was like the Swiss economy of using the given paint and the given canvas and using the rectangle, but is it also a little rebellious to like admit to yourself like, I just want to be a painter?
Yeah, sure.
I got somewhere.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. No, I definitely think that I'm very drilled in and consumed with this making of these paintings, and then you have these kind of thoughts where you step back and say, of course, what a ridiculous thing to do, even in the context of making paint, in the context of other paintings, or like these feel very selfish and like they're not engaging in an explicit way with social issues. I think that they're engaging with social perceptual issues for me for an audience or something like that. But I think we all feel out of step on various things at various times, and we can't really, well, we can, but we shouldn't let it get too much of a conflict within ourselves. I think we I don't know another way to really do it. I guess I know another way to do it, but I don't really want to do another way to do it clearly because I keep doing this. And then that's just within the world of painting, let alone in the world of art, and then the wider world where this stuff is useless on certain levels and very useful on others. I don't know. I mean, I remember I keep kind of having these earlier memories of being an artist that I'm talking about, and I remember realizing that I wanted to be an artist because I wanted this stuff to change the way I saw things, not the way I saw things change the art sometimes, or something like that I made.
I used to feel like, we've had these conversations before, like, oh my God, like, it's so weird to make art in a way. It's so selfish. And when 9/11 happened, the day before, I'm like making this piece in my studio, and I thought it was cheery and happy, and the day after it looked like I-beams and disaster. So like my perception changed. But the thing that like all these years of making work, like I feel now like there's like, I have to be really, really selfish to make the work, but I don't think it's selfish to make the work because I feel that it gives people stuff. Like, like when I look at a painting, I'm getting a lot from it, and I don't want to say I'm feeling healed or something, but like it's a place for me to think about like what's going on in the world, and so I feel like we're doing a public service also.
Yeah, I'll co-write that definitely. When I go and see a lot of art, and it just makes me feel great to see someone discovering something and letting me step into their shoes. I think I'm hoping what I'm doing with these paintings is something that I experience, which is that you go to see someone's work and you feel like you're stepping into their shoes and you're seeing the process and the discovery and the like excitement of like, oh, look what I did. Kind of you relive it through them in a vicarious secondary way.
Yeah.
And I yes, you're right. I know that for myself, that as a human, that is a really wonderful experience to have. So maybe that's what I can do for someone else. Sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's also like, for us, I mean, we eat, drink, live art. We really, like, you know, it's so much a part of our daily practice, and it kind of is our, like, religion in a way, I would say, you know, so whatever. But, so I'm gonna, my last question, it's a podcast now. If you could choose any painting that you could have in the world, what would it be? You guys know what I'm talking about, right? Okay.
These are always the questions at the end of the podcast, yes, like which painting could you steal or whatever.
And this is where we can go into a long conversation.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
all right, I'm going to say one more thing. We generally don't fight, but our biggest arguments are over color. Because I see more yellow than he does. And so that's I think our biggest, we don't have fights, but our quarrels are about color.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that is physiological. Women see generally a bigger range of color.
I see more yellow.
Women are generally tetrachromats instead of trichromats.
Yeah. So then when I say that's that color, you should listen
right.
to me.
So, yeah. Right, so the thing between a blue and a blue-green or something like that, you see more of the yellow in it, it looks greener to you. And,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Our talks are ridiculous.
Those are fun,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of like an artwork I could have, yeah, I kind of, and I think we're going to have kind of, we will agree on this because we have to both live with this painting that we're going to steal. So it would be probably
No,
like,
we don't.
An Antonia de Messina, like, you know,
Yeah, we could live with
portrait
that.
or something like that.
Yeah.
Something really exquisite. Though there's certain of those kind of really clear portraits that are often have a northern influence that just are like, I'm amazed at how the contemporaneity of those images are, when some of the other paintings from those periods just look very old to me. I love them, but they just really look old, and I don't really quite recognize the era in them exactly as something that I feel is close to me. But in some of those portraits, they're looking at you with this like audacity from like 1427 or something like that, or a little later, and it just like cuts through all those centuries. So that kind of that feeling that they can kind of project themselves into the future. I mean, we only could wish that our work could do that in 200 years.
All right. I'm shocked because I had no idea you felt that way about Messina's
I told
work.
you that before.
Yeah, but it was in like passing, like, yeah, no, like, all right, so when you go to the Louvre and everybody's looking at the Mona Lisa, you go around the corner and there's like the most amazing Messina painting of like Christ with the blood dripping down, and it's like you could see the blood pulsing through his veins, and like I'm like, why isn't everybody looking at this painting? It's like the most exquisite, the way he does the corners of the eyes. It's just so amazing, and I didn't know I knew you liked him, but I didn't. That's the painting, or that's him.
Sure.
I thought you'd be de Kooning, because we've had this conversation before, and you were like, de Kooning's the man. Yeah.
Well, if I had to live with one amazing painting, it might be a Messina. Yeah, I do love de Kooning, definitely, but.
Yeah. I'm kind of into Vuillard right now. Vuillard interiors has to be really small, claustrophobic, with a patch of green in it, like the one that's in the Met. What's that collection? Anyway, give me a good Vuillard and a Messina.
Sure. Okay.
We'll be happy.
Next birthday.
Thank you.
I feel like we should kind of do questions now. Is that all your questions?
That was the podcast
Okay,
question, the
okay.
closing question.
And anybody have anything they want to ask? Yeah, Joe?
A quick statement and a question. So many of your comments.
It does change, but I guess I'm kind of fascinated or amazed that it doesn't change more because of the place surrounding it. I think it changes in terms of like I have more space up in Maine, so I feel like that's where I'm going to be making big paintings. So that's much more the factor to me than than I can go hear the birds sing or something like that. I don't know. I know I'm beating a dead horse by denying all this.
I
for
think
sure.
you are full of denial right now, my dear.
Having read about other artists, I still think that's a fascinating and from your perspective, honest answer. So the candor is wonderful.
Okay, good. Yeah.
How your drawing practice
Yeah. These paintings have no relationship to a drawing practice per se. Like, I don't ever make any preparatory drawings. I almost like 99% of the time never make a drawing somewhere in the middle of a painting to figure something out. So they really are all about the improvisation of the painting in these. What my drawing practice is, as if it is that I have kind of all these parallel things I do. So one of them is that I do these works of, they're on paper, so I guess they're a drawing, but they're much more like paintings because they're with kind of colored inks and it's less of a linear drawing idea. And then I have a thing where when I travel, I make a sketchbook, and so I'll draw people, like when we were in India, I just, that's all I was doing artistically while we were traveling around, is just making drawings of people, because that is a way for me to kind of engage in the place and the people, and it's kind of great fun when everyone kind of hangs around and watches you do this. So that's why I want to do that there. So I don't have much of a drawing kind of relationship literally in these paintings, but they have a lot of, I think what it is that the drawing aspect in these paintings is that I'm fascinated with how you can make a line in these, I can make a line in these paintings, and it is conscious of it being a line and in a formal sense and a kind of a shape thing and trying to kind of run your eye around the thing in a racetrack kind of form or whatever. And then later, because of something else that happens over here, then that line can kind of all of a sudden stand in for, let's say over here, this kind of like upturned eyebrow shape in that kind of teal blue or something like that. And then that little bit of wider bit of it becomes a pupil or something like that. And I'm fascinated with lines that are innocent of their eventual deployment in terms of actually having some sort of figurative element or descriptive quality. I want all my lines to, as best as I can, never know what they're describing until it all of a sudden happens. And there's times when I do add things that are like, I kind of see it now, and I know that that line might feel like a mouth. But I like it to have a preponderance of kind of having this kind of weird, loose energy of innocence to the lines in a formal, abstract way that can then all of a sudden kind of have a snap of descriptive quality. If you're a cartoonist, you're making simplified lines, but you know that line is going to be Charlie Brown's hair, that squiggle or something like that. And I want to kind of make that squiggle in a sense that is not attached to any descriptive thing, and then all of a sudden it like acts as hair or something like that.
I have another question.
Okay.
So, I feel like
almost
I'm
done.
like the interrogating you. But All right, so from watching you, like, you're saying that you do all these random lines, and then you find like a figure in them. My question is, once you find that figure, do you tighten it up? Do you make it more figure, or do you bring it back so it's not so figure? Like, where are you with that?
Both depending, I would say. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, sometimes I will kind of add some corroborating evidence that kind of thing can kind of snap into some descriptive quality. But then sometimes I will just as much do the things that kind of actually tries to kind of not only drive towards that recognition thing completely, and will be a little bit more about obscuring, or, oh, there's a terrible R word, problematizing, you know, kind of the image or something like that. If you're a good abstract painter, you don't let that happen, quote unquote. I want to be a bad abstract painter. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that the analogy would be like a hook in a song, where, you know, there's kind of an earworm quality to kind of certain sounds and music and melody things or whatever, or things like that, where it kind of just, it grabs you in a way, and as long as it's not totally annoying like some horrible jingle or something like that, it is incredibly like amazing to watch your brain hold on to that. You know, I'll do this thing when I wake up in the morning. Sometimes I'll have a song from the day before that'll just like replay right at that moment, in that very kind of subliminal kind of moment that I'm in, and I'm kind of fascinated with the way that our brains are kind of holding on to things like that. And so, okay, pleasure is really an important part of what I want to have from making these paintings. I want to have a real lot of fun making these paintings. That's like priority number one, and I want that to hopefully be the thing that, you know, that can be recognized in other people. That there's something in the process that feels open enough and discovery enough and like wow enough, that's the kind of the main attitude that is emanating from the paintings. Not so much, I think that the fact that you see a head or a face or a body is actually kind of a little inconsequential, as long as that, it's all part of the service of that other things I was saying, actually.
Sometimes they're letter forms like that.
Yeah.
I'm reading that painting, it says paint, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, because we want to read things. We want to have that like kind of, you know, stimulus of stuff, just as like as recognizing a face, you know, coming out of the, you know, whether recognizing a friend or just whether an image is of a human or not, we prioritize those things. Of course, that's why pareidolia happens, is because, you know, we want to see that bunny rabbit in the clouds. You know, we want to have Jesus appear to us in the tortilla. You know, that is confirming of a lot of things, certainly.
Are you trying to undo those references and exist more in a place of reference?
No, I think what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to kind of set up a situation where actually every one of you might have a rather different impression of what's happening in the painting. And people could even have a little bit of an argument about where a face is or not, or where it is. I'm making it a bit ambiguous in a way where sometimes there's a kind of almost a cubistic stutter of several bits of face or body or something like that. And I'm kind of trying to make a painting that can be everything to everyone in that kind of sense, maybe. Or possibly like just very different experiences. Yes. Hey. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, I endorse that. Yes.
There's kind of an overt funniness to some of your collages
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and poignancy to
Mm-hmm.
that, and then also in your installations. So I'm wondering if you sort of think about that also.
Are these funny, Linda? Are any of these funny?
I'm just wondering, it's like you have such a sense of humor, so I think we're talking about
Right.
fun, if that's what maybe.
Yeah, fun and funny. I think that they're a little funny sometimes, and I think that it's to try and solve the humor problem that abstraction has, which is it's so goddamn serious. Like, and it doesn't. How do you make abstraction funny? You know, like I thought one person that did it really well very early in their work was Mary Heilman. Had like this absurd hilarity to her painting, her abstract paintings, and I love that. That was a big influence on me. You know, this is your paintings of hers from the '70s. You know, and so it's very easy to work humor into narrative or figurative work. Actually, if you want to do that, you set up the situation that gives that thing, and it's So I guess I'm trying to. I think that. That there's the way that I can try and that I have thought about humor and funniness in abstract painting is that the way that feels most fruitful to me is like an absurd idea of humor, that things are a little bit ridiculous and kind of, and so these I think hopefully still have that kind of quality of like they're a little bit absurd, as if they're a scenario, it's kind of like what absurdity is kind of what is this exactly, right? It's kind of so something like that, maybe. Yeah, I think that I do have these, and I don't think this is pretty common, I think, is that we have these kind of little internal rules that we have to give ourselves a certain set of guide rails for doing things to move forward, because if there's no rules, then you basically can move in any direction with equal weight, right? And that's an impossible situation to make any decisions. You have to kind of move forward with decisions somehow. So you make yourself some rules, and then so let's say that the rules that I set up at one point was to kind of make that kind of physical edge a little lumpy and funky or whatever, to kind of make them weird was my thought. So that was a rule that I kind of gave myself for a while, and then I managed to find a way easily to kind of not do it anymore. So I guess that was a rule that I broke, and and yeah, I think that I'm not sure. I mean, I don't have any really hard rules, and I try and have still always the possibility. I have to want to always recognize that the rules are mine, that they're mine to break. They're mine to make. They're mine to break. Maybe
Isn't it silly?
Yeah.
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 So my question dovetails perfectly with yours, which is, when you were using your mother's paints, feel like, were you aware that she was presenting you with an opportunity to use colors you never would have used before, and you didn't walk through that door, or did you subconsciously try to bring them back to a palette that is more?
Well, maybe it was an attempt to, I always want to find that other color that I've never found. And a lot of the time I feel like I've kind of run out of colors. Like I use a lot of color, clearly, but
That's what mushrooms are for.
Yeah. But I often kind of feel like I want to get that other thing. So maybe that's a good point. It was kind of like, well, it was a found color. I'm fascinated by the fact that, if I'm correct in this, that Joseph Albers never mixed a color in his late mature paintings for 30 years. He had a library of every single brand of paint and would only basically choose the paint, squeeze it out, and with a palette knife. So he doesn't mix anything, he doesn't use a brush. He basically is finding the found color in those tubes to then do, of course, what he does, what he orchestrates in a way. So, yeah, I think that is probably a factor here is, but did I ever find any colors that she did that I hadn't ever used? I don't know about that exactly. But it was a different relationship to kind of, you know, the way it usually is, which is, you know, no, ultramarine, there's my ultramarine again, and, you know, then I'll do something to it, and I have certain proclivities about that. Like I always am mixing Prussian blue with alizarin crimson to get a black, let's say, or something like that. So I have some of those favorite things that I do, definitely, yeah. One more, Ron? Yeah? Sure. Okay, okay. Yes, Dr. Barron. Thank you.
And yeah, and I'm just wondering, you know, like how you find your way through that.
How does that happen?
Yes, and give
Yeah.
yourself permission to do that, and then don't feel like you're being like
So there was a couple things that have. One is that basically I'm pretty clear. This will be the last question. I think this is a good one to end on. Is that I'm pretty clear that I have to always feel excitement in what I'm doing for, like I said, that energy, to that attitude to kind of be emanating from the painting. So it has to always feel to me like I'm kind of in some sort of a new territory within my own context of some sort. So that's kind of why that happens in a way. When I, 2005, when I did this piece, this cardboard sculpture that was such a complete different thing than I'd ever done, and in, you know, maybe like we all think we owe our audience something, or like we have some expectation of who looks at our work or what we think they want, you know, and that's very cute on our parts to kind of feel that. You know, we should be so lucky to have people that actually are like waiting to see what you do. but I basically just was kind of compelled to do this very different thing. It was very different visually, although it had a lot of threads and was thinking about a lot of the same things. And I remember Kathy, as well as my gallery person, which was Karen Golden at the time, were kind of like, ooh, what are you doing? Do you remember this? Like you were kind of a little doubtful about where I was going?
With the cardboard?
With full stop, that cardboard piece. Do you remember that? That was my memory of it. At least at some point you're like, what are you doing?
Well, yeah, also I had to basically go outside to go to my studio because
That's true.
I couldn't, you took up, anyway, yeah.
Not quite, but yeah. Yes, but so I was conscious of a little bit of doubt, and I was also conscious of the fact that I had a kind of a pretty clear idea of what it could be in the end. I had a vision in my head of what it could be. And then once I had enough of it going, you very much came around to kind of being endorsing of it.
Because we're not in your head. We don't see what you're,
of course.
yeah.
And my gallery did as well, and I put this piece up, and I felt that it was very successful in terms of feedback, and I was like, wow, potentially we can go wherever the fuck we want, as long as we kind of really commit to it and kind of make it really important to us. you can completely make a left turn, and you'd be surprised at how many people will come with you and follow you, basically, despite what you think is like, oh, they're expecting another set of oil paintings that are going to be 60 inches tall and, this kind of subject matter or whatever. So it was a tremendously empowering kind of thing to have happened, and it just showed me that, okay, well, the next thing that I'm going to do is not going to be keep going on that left turn and make another piece out of cardboard, but it's just to kind of take that validation that I got from it to kind of do whatever I wanted to. It was okay for me to just kind of please myself, and you would find out that, yes, people will be pleased by you pleasing yourself.
I think you should be careful about what you're saying.
Okay. Pleasing myself?
Yeah, please. No, but yes. But the other thing I want to point out is when you did Full Stop, that was also kind of an honor to your father.
Yeah.
Who
for
passed
sure.
away.
There you go. There's another connection there of our particular ways we kind of honor things. It was very much a connection to thinking about my dad's. Anyway, I don't have to explain the piece because it's not in front of us, but it was very much about thinking about my dad's generation and also Red Grooms, who I worked for many years at that point, and and kind of got a lot of influence of. So I think Red is probably one important point in this sense of working for Red. Showed me that you could just like hit the gas on motivation, and you end up where you end up, and that is an actual positive energy to build into the work. It's just like full forward, kind of energy is something people do respond to, and then you've gotten also at the same time to go wherever you want to go. Okay, that's
the end,
probably
right?
mic drop.
Good job.